The first true episode of our monthly live stream. My name is Zach, and I have decided, after much debate last month, that we would call our live stream The Freelance. So, welcome everyone to the first episode of The Freelance. I'm joined this week by Nick. Nick, say hello. Explain. Who are you?
Hello,
How do we know each other?
Oh, how do we know each other?
Yeah.
Many years of doing reenactment, but never in the same group.
Who are you? How do we know each other?
And yeah, I just got the echo too while I was finding the link to share around.
It's okay. Cool. We kind of have orbited, but never been part of the same group. But I think we might have met beforehand, but the first time we properly did something together was at a Bosworth a while ago.
Yes. So I think we'd been at the same events several times across years, and then there was 2012, 2011, 2013, something like that. You and Matt Bailey were doing a kind of, what's the best way to put it, a tournament combat trial of arms kind of thing that I thought I'd better go through. And we did a bunch of fighting on the Saturday evening after quite a busy day of reenacting. And then that morphed into a more formal thing with your group and the umbrella group that I'm a member of, Destria and the Rules of the Roses Federation, doing more of that in the evenings at Bosworth for a few years.
Yeah. And so the first year, I think it was me and Matt kind of put out a challenge to everyone and said, come along, we'll fight anyone who comes. I think the first year it was literally just you.
That sounds about right.
Yeah, so that kind of instantly made me think, here's a guy that I can get on with if he's like willing to come out and fight someone he doesn't really know, just because it's nightly to do that. And then it got really big over the coming years, but you still every year came back and joined in the challenge.
Yeah, and it's interesting looking back at some of the pictures of those of that first year, because it gives me an idea of how far my harness has come since then.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a that was a really fun set of fights. That was very tiring.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, especially that first year for you, because Matt and I did it hoping that maybe, we would be tested by fighting lots of people. It ended up, each of us only had to fight one person and you had to fight two. So that was, it kind of reversed itself. But enough people kind of took it and ran with it that the next year it grew.
Well, and I think by the third year, we had to limit everybody to fighting just once.
Yeah.
Which was great that so many people wanted to get involved and do things after hours at a reenactment event in kit.
Yeah. Which doesn't often happen. People very often at a lot of 15th century reenactments will that it will be out of hours, out of kit, and that's fine if that's what you want to do, but it's nice to do that sort of thing. We've got some people in the chat. We've got the Lizard Viking says good evening. Alex says lads. Welcome, Alex. And Leonidas Sparta says hello there. Hello, everyone. And there are 6 people in the chat so far, so do come along and say hello and leave a comment. We are going to we've kind of got a few topics to talk about this week. I know that I think I've been pretty bad at publicizing this one. I think in the lead up to last month's one, I left a few more posts, so I need to get better at that. And I don't know when I schedule it on Restream, which is what we're using tonight. I don't know if it shows up on YouTube as scheduled. So, guys in the chat, if you could let me know whether or not you saw it scheduled. I scheduled it a couple of days ago. If not, I need to work out how to do that. But
yeah, I think if people are subscribed to your YouTube channel or maybe alerts, they'll get notifications that it's supposed to be coming if the connection works right.
Hopefully.
I've thrown the link around.
Yeah, great. We've got a few topics to talk about tonight. We're hoping. So Nick has kind of signed up to be a bit of a co-host with me, hopefully, and we'll be able to do these once a month, first Wednesday of the month, probably around about 8 o'clock UK time. That might change. We'll see. Hopefully, it'll go well. So, Nick, you, if you just kind of, that's how we met each other. What do you do? Obviously, I've said before, I'm a jouster with the group Destria and a reenactor as well. Where do you reenact? What do you do?
So my main reenactment focus is help run a group called the Retinue of Sir John Middleton, which is a kind of child group. It's kind of a weird thing to say. A member group of the larger Wars of the Roses Federation organization. We portray either English soldiers in Burgundian service under the command of a chap called Sir John Middleton, or his household troops in England, depending on what year it is and the context we're setting. And our focus is very much on the sort of maintained household soldier rather than trying to push high status. Like the highest status things that we have going on in our camp is our couple of command tents for whoever is portraying either a vintner or events where we know Middleton is Middleton himself. And that's actually the household banner that we have hung up on my other thing that may...
Your audio's gone a bit weird for me, mate.
How are we doing now?
That's better.
Okay. Yeah. Where did I get cut off?
The household banner.
Yeah, this needs some repairs, but we'll come on to projects in a bit. The other thing that people may have seen pictures of me with you doing or on your stream is I play the Duke of Gloucester at the Tewkesbury Medieval Festival every summer. Which is probably the event that we've, other than Bosworth, that we've done together the most.
Yeah.
But that's kind of the one time of the year that I do high status things, and it's a nice difference, but also it's very different and very exhausting.
Yeah.
That's mainly what I do in reenactment. But I'm almost entirely late 15th century focused. Within those specific kind of 1450, 1460 through to 1485-ish.
Cool. Great. So you kind of mentioned projects, so let's move on to projects. And guys, if you in the chat have been working on any projects or in the you can leave the comments as well, telling us what projects you're working on. Nick, have you been working on any projects?
I have been actively procrastinating several projects.
Great.
But by getting them out to talk about today, I'm hoping this will motivate me to actually do some more about it. So I'm pretty sure our household banners need some repairs from just general weather. And then I have a couple of livery vests that I have been working on for too long that need finishing for a friend of mine and myself.
Yeah.
It's all right. I've got 3D printer stuff everywhere at the moment, so just knocking it everywhere.
Oh dear. It's a shame you can't 3D print a livery vest.
You can't, but one of the things that I have been considering is learning some digital sculpting to 3D print masters for casting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then I thought, or I could just practice traditional sculpting and just sculpt the wax and do it properly.
Yeah.
Haven't figured that one out yet. What about you, Zach? What projects have you got on the go at the moment?
So, just like you, I've been procrastinating on a lot of things. Quite a long time ago, I made this, which is a bollock dagger handle, and the aim was to make a blunt dagger with it. But my plans have changed, and it was at the last year at an event where we did a parade. I was wearing one of my sharp daggers, and it started coming out of its sheath when the horse I was riding was trotting. So I have decided to make myself a fake dagger that I can wear. So this piece of wood here will be done up like a wood cord scabbard. It will just literally be a dagger that I can wear to look like I'm wearing a dagger, but not actually wearing a dagger. And I think that would be useful for battlefield use as well as parades, or maybe even visiting a beer tent or something like that. You don't necessarily want to be carrying sharp knives around all the time, although it's essential for a 15th century look to be wearing something like that, right? They just wear them all the time, but not always wise.
It's everywhere in illustrations. It's an interesting thing because I was looking at some Burgundian illustrations of kind of higher status stuff to go along with the Gloucester portrayal, and there's a really nice illustration of the Burgundian court, and every single man in there is wearing a dagger. And so even in like a high status social context where they don't need to carry any accessories, all of these people are still wearing knives on their belts.
Yeah.
And seeing illustrations like that kind of really hammers home like how important some of those are to kind of completing the trail.
Yeah. It's something that's kind of we don't have at all, and in many ways, in England certainly, that sort of thing could actually get you arrested. Reenactment is a defence, but it's not an exemption.
Yeah.
Maybe we should talk to Matt Easton about that at some point, because I know he's been very involved in campaigning about those laws. Let's have a look. What have some people been doing? Leonidas Sparta says that he has been preparing for an upcoming reenactment in March, making a new shield, repairing damaged kit, making some new clothes, and kitting up others and other bits and bobs. So, Leonidas, that is a lot. Yeah. I guess your first reenactment in March is earlier than ours, probably. I think Leonidas Sparta is based in Canada, and a Spartan reenactment in Canada in March is probably going to be pretty cold. So hats off to you if that is the case. That is very brave. Alex Parry says, I need to make a linen waistband liner for my hose for this weekend. This weekend? What are you doing this weekend, Alex?
Yeah.
Are there reenactments happening this weekend? Or is it a training? Let us know. And the Lizard Viking says, gotten a tiny bit of writing done for my fantasy story. Should also say I changed the scene based on your answer to my question in a previous live stream. So thanks again, Zach. Really happy to help. If you have any more questions, do leave them down below. Do I get a writing credit now?
We should add a Q&A section at the end.
Yeah, we should. That's a good point. Yeah. Right. Let's move on. I should probably at this point, because I'm really bad at YouTube stuff and I'm trying to get better. If you're watching this back, do leave a comment about what you're working on, because I do read them all. I really enjoy reading them all. And if you have any questions, then please do, even after the stream is finished. I know that for many of you in the US, this might be a bit of a weird time to have a live stream. Do join in the conversation at a later date. Okay, let's
move. Call to action, Zach.
Yeah, the call to action. Well. And I generally only remember to do it at the end. Apparently, I'm supposed to do it before then.
Yeah,
is that right? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. If you're enjoying the video, give it a thumbs up.
Yeah.
Tell your friends about it. Subscribe to Zach's channel. We'll bring up some fake statistics next time that some percentage of his viewers aren't subscribed.
Yeah. And here's something that I actually would be really interested in. If you think this is a good idea, then leave me a comment.
Or if you think it's a bad idea.
If you think it's a bad idea, if you think of something, some really bad reason why I should definitely not do this, then let me know that as well. Because I think it's, this could be the legacy that I leave to the reenactment world. Maybe this is my, whatever, Michelangelo's David or whatever. Maybe that's what this is. Okay, we're going to move on. Alex says it's his armoured fighting event with historic equitation. Yes, that is next weekend. Wow.
Oh, cool.
The Lizard Viking says, not writing credit yet, lol, but if I keep sending you questions and you keep answering them, then maybe. Well, there we go. I'll try to answer any questions you have. No, Alex, I'm not going to say the German for armoured fighting because I will butcher it, and two, every other word I'm going to speak tonight is English, basically. I know that you're into your German armour and that sort of thing, but for many people who aren't into this, when I start using German words, they don't understand. For these things, they don't understand what I'm talking about. So, yes. If you want to find out what armoured fighting is in German, then check the live chat replay.
Yeah.
Okay. So, research. What research have you done since we last talked? And this could be really short or really long because we've never talked online about this sort of thing before. So Is there anything that has tickled your fancy research-wise that you've read?
I haven't been looking into anything specific, mostly because the projects that I've got on at the moment are things that I kind of already have either done, I've made before, repairing the flag, all this sort of thing. I did mention that I was looking at some illustrations of higher status courts. And I often find that idle distractions of medieval art there's always something new to see. I went to Bruges at the end of last year, so I have a very nice Van Eyck book, which I still need to finish going through, that I have mainly just leafed through and looked at the pictures. So that's probably on the list for over the next month or so. Mostly looking at illustrations, noticing. I really should do some kind of analysis on the things that I notice. I know that one of our mutual friends did a really, really nice statistical analysis of different component parts of illustrations in the Beecham pageant, and it might be interesting to do something similar for other groups of artwork.
Yeah, that would definitely be a good idea. We should probably talk to Alex about whether or not we can share that, because that was kind of a secret project for a little while, and then he did a lot of work, and it's just kind of sitting there, isn't it? But that was a really interesting thing. Right? Yeah. I know that he's working on other projects, so maybe it's just sitting waiting until he's got a bit more time. That's cool. You've been to Bruges a few times, haven't you, for research purposes?
Twice now, although the first time was The first time I was lucky in that I was lucky that I got to go on a holiday to Bruges. And when I was there, I was able to go to the St. John's Hospital Museum, which has a lot of Memling work in it. Okay. This time when I went, that was closed while I was out there. I went with my partner Rosie, but we did get to go to galleries which has a lot of Van Eyck. So get to see. If you are a fan of late medieval artwork and history, Bruges is fantastic. There is it's not so much that Bruges has more history than any other town in Northern Europe or any other city in Northern Europe, but the quality of the museums and the way that they've put those collections together is really, really good. And also all of the museums are of an appropriate size. They're kind of bite-sized in the way that something like the British Museum could be a full day trip kind of thing, whereas the museums in Bruges tend to be 90 minutes and then you can then move on.
The British Museum, you could spend a day just in one gallery, and they're so big. A lot of the British not just the British Museum, but a lot of the museums in England are so big that they have a lot of the collection isn't on show.
Yes.
And it's not like they theme their galleries, but there's not often a theme. Like you won't get a medieval museum and a Renaissance museum and that sort of thing. It's just kind of like, here's everything from all around the world.
Yeah.
So that can cause a problem. It's definitely worth going to, but I'd love to visit. I know we talked about it before. That museum sounds really cool. Alex says he was just correcting his own spelling. See, that's how little I know about German that I didn't even notice that it was spelt wrong. So yeah, that's on me, Alex. Apologies. So I've got a nice little thing to share. This isn't really my research because Augusto, who has been on the channel before, he's shared various different things. But I was reading through some of his posts because he's I don't know when he finds time to do anything except for research because he's always posting research. So, but this is a really interesting part from a letter that he's found. A Milanese ambassador to the Burgundian army, talking about battle tactics, and he's talking about mounted archers, and this is some of the translation from that Augusto has put together. He says, but these horses are more harmful than useful because an archer on foot will loose 3 arrows faster and in a quicker time and more accurately than loosing 2 on horse. And if they are on foot, they stay closer and they stay more still and secure during the battle than when they are on horse. And even if they dismount during a battle, they care a lot about not losing their horse. And because of this, it is said that my lord wants to send away all their horses and they remain on foot on the field, which the horses will be provided for in Burgundy. Really interesting because a lot of people will say that mounted archers were just infantry that rode to the battle and never shot from horseback. But it sounds from this that actually it was done, but that they weren't so keen on it because it was less effective. So
I'd love to see the rest of that document to find out how else it refers to archers, because I mean, I would have to go and ask people who've done experimental archaeology with warbows, but the idea that you would draw a large English warbow from the back of a horse seems insane to me. Like maybe it is possible. Maybe I'm just maybe I'm underestimating, the skill here. but that is an interesting thing, because talk in the Burgundian ordinances, the archers or the archers in each of the lances are sometimes detailed as mounted and sometimes detailed just as archers. And hearing a passage like that, one wonders if those observations are what caused the flipping flopping between whether or not they're considered to be mounted troops or not.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting thing to say. I'd like to see the rest of the document as well. And one of the barriers that we found for doing research about how the Burgundian army functioned is the translation element. Because there's almost certainly lots of excellent literature out there that we have no access to, purely because we can't read the modern version of the language that it's written in, let alone the medieval version of the language.
And even if you can find a translated one, what I've found with some translations in the past is that if the translator doesn't have a good grasp of medieval military or like material culture, then they use a wrong word to describe something. So I've got a lovely translation of the Paston Letters that has everyone running around in leather jackets, because when they read Jack, they translated it as leather jacket, but it's a different garment there.
And also the late 19th, early 20th century obsession with categorization. Some of those translations, it's really important that we categorize like all these different. So, this one said helm, that means this particular type of helmet, or this one said, which looking at kind of purchase rolls and household accounts and these kinds of things, that the obsession with categorization that kind of the modern mind has doesn't seem to be as present in medieval literature.
Yeah. And also they were innovating. So when we look back, we go like, we look at a helmet and we'll go, is this an armet or is it a bicoquet or a close helm? But if they're innovating, they might not actually have a different name for it yet. It might be like, look at this different way that I've assembled my bassinet.
Yeah.
Like, because no one's actually coined a phrase yet. So,
yes.
Yeah. So you might find some things, this isn't an actual example, but you might find someone talking about a bassinet when actually they're just using that word because it's the closest word that they have for something that hasn't been officially coined yet. The Lizard Viking says, this is surprising. I assume the bowmen were using longbows. I thought those were impossible to use on horseback. So I've seen Mike Loads shoot a longbow from horseback. It was not one of the heaviest longbows, but I think we need to be careful about how we use the data. I did a video about this, and it's the only video that I've done that I've actually taken down, because I don't know that if I explain myself completely, but I think we need to be careful about how we use the data from the Mary Rose longbows, because yes, some of them are extremely heavy, 160 pounds and that sort of thing. But some of them are 100 pounds, which is, that's not an unreasonable difference in poundage. And then you've also got to ask, what are the differences in the theatre of... Augusto has joined the chat. There we go. You speak of him and he appears. With the... what was I saying? Yeah, what are the differences in usage of a longbow at sea compared to a longbow in the field? And would archers have different longbows even, if they're scouting on horseback, might they bring their light longbow or be issued with lighter longbows and choose heavier ones if they were intending to go into heavier fighting.
I think there's also a contextual element here, which is true of any archaeological find, any historical research. Mary Rose is a member of the Mary Rose's crew is a prestigious position. It is going to be held by either the social elite or the kind of skillful elite, or at least that's how we imagine it, given what we know about kind of historical flagships and these kinds of things. And so this could potentially end up with like skewing the data that you're looking at, because they might be the best of the best or whatever, you know. And it's the same thing that we have this, to go on a non-medieval tangent here, the impression that all ancient Greek plays are these fantastic masterpieces. Well, no, just the only ones we have are the ones that people thought were worth preserving.
Yeah.
So there are almost certainly thousands of plays that were written that are garbage, and nobody wanted to preserve them because they were bad. So all we have left are the good ones. And in the same way, we do not have many artifacts from archers of that period. They're all concentrated in this potentially very kind of high-end find that we have. Yeah. Or this is incredibly typical, we don't know.
Yeah, because it could be either way, right? It's either so yeah. But basically what I'm saying is, if you were looking at someone shooting a longbow from horseback, don't think, oh, I've seen Todd's video, Arrows versus Armour, they used a 160-pound bow, therefore that's what it's talking about in this letter. A 70-pound bow will kill a guy if it hits him in the face. And that's
the reason we limit battlefield bows to a very low poundage.
Yeah, absolutely. Vadim Heldar says, "Good evening, gentlemen." Hello. Good to see. Lizard Viking says, "Please continue talking about mounted archers. One of the characters in my story is actually a mounted archer." Wow. We're definitely getting that writer's credit from Lizard Viking. Yeah. Magister Armorum say Augusto has copied his comment from under Mike Loder's video on this. Just as a note, it seems like sometimes mounted archers were indeed expected to shoot from horse. An Italian ambassador to the Burgundian court of Charles the Bold, in one of his letters, does say how it's preferable that the archers be deployed on foot rather than on horse, as they take less space when deployed, can shoot 3 arrows in the time it takes the mounted ones to shoot 2, and aren't as prone to run away as their mounted counterparts. To find out about the mode, or most common poundage, not average, of the draw weight of a longbow, it's better to read original period sources.
Yeah.
And good evening. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We do see in period sources, at some points it seems like the bows are extremely effective, and at other points they seem to just do nothing. So it's not a case of, oh, I saw in that in the Henry V on Netflix that the bow was incredible.
Yeah.
It didn't always manage to do all of that. Alex is saying about the translations. He says the variety of words for one thing as language wasn't standardized, as well as mistranslations simply due to nuance in the word, where it can mean multiple things. And this happens a lot with Latin. Yeah. Agree.
Hard agree.
You just can't you can't be specific, or you need to be careful when being specific when you're reading period texts.
And also, we know from modern languages, the same words can mean different things in different areas of the country, or different areas of one country, or different countries across a region.
Yeah.
And that must be true for medieval language.
Yeah. Absolutely. Robert DC says, "Good evening, Zach. Nice to see you again." Nice to see you, Robert DC. And for those of you who have joined us just recently, because we have had quite a few new joins since the initial welcome. I'm joined this evening by Nick. Nick is a very good friend of mine from the reenacting world of late 15th century English battle reenactments. And we've just kind of been chatting, going through some segments which I think will become regular things as we go on. Augusto says, here's a link to an article I put together regarding the English longbow and its interaction with armour. I will share that link. It may not post in the chat, but I've read it before. So Augusto, if you send me the link to it again, then I will put that in the description once we're done. Lovely. Okay. We're on to almost the main topic.
Yeah, main topic.
Main topic. We've been going for almost not yet. So we've got events. We've not had any events for a while, but we have been talking, haven't we, about Tewkesbury? Kind of been planning our year as well.
Tewkesbury, we're putting together plans for. On it is on the calendar. Some smaller events later in the year. Training events at the start of the year.
Yeah.
Things together at the moment. It's February now, which feels crazy because it doesn't feel like that long ago that we were still in 2022. But
yeah. So
Feldlager is requires a lot of organization for us.
Yeah. So you're going across to the Feldlager next September. Is that right?
That depends.
Okay. You're hoping.
It has been on our calendar to go and do an event like that in Europe with Middletons for several years, and there have been different various different things that have got in the way of us doing that. Because it is a step up in organization over doing a normal English reenactment event that's a couple of hours in the car. It is on our list to go and do something like that, and we would be coming as English infantry and hopefully as a reasonable sized unit, but we need to make plans at some point to do these kinds of things, and herding cats as trying to organize reenactors is
very tricky. Very tricky.
Yes.
I think because I would love to go and do that, and that's definitely on my bucket list to go over and take part. It's not going to happen this year because I am a teacher, and it takes place during term time. It's just not possible for me this time, but I definitely want to do it before I get too old to wear armor and run up and down hills and all of that sort of thing. I think we definitely need to do an immersive event in England as well. There just aren't any.
Yeah. Well, yes, and one of the things that I'm going to be starting to do this year is I've done a few events in the past pre-COVID times, is to go back into the historical LARP circles and start doing more of those events, which are very immersive, because that's the drive. That's what everyone's there to do, and hopefully can bring some of the things that they do in those contexts into some kind of immersive reenactment events. Where I make it sound like there's a distinction. Like the distinction is purely in like how you label it and essentially your equipment, right? Like that's pretty much it. Reenactment is LARP, but for a different purpose. LARP is reenactment, but with a different audience. Like that's just kind of the way it shakes out. And hopefully that'll be good for your algorithm, because that'll make a bunch of people really angry.
Yeah. If you disagree with what Nick has just said, then leave a like and share with your share this video with your friends, all of that sort of thing. Augusto says yes, come to the Feldlager. They need infantry, so
Yeah.
I think Augusto is hoping to deliver a cavalry charge to infantry, possibly. Drac, hi Alex, good to see you. Says hopefully we can fight alongside each other at Tewkesbury. Hopefully, yeah. We're even we're looking into what we can do to get the bodyguard kind of more sorted this year, because it all came together pretty last minute last year, didn't it? Because it was the first one back after COVID,
and I think about probably a month before Tewkesbury, I was sat there going, well, doing this on my own, that's fine. I can do this. No worries. And then Zach to come help me out and to hopefully have a good time doing bodyguarding. And next year, or this year, I suppose, it's 2023 now, things will be more cohesive, I think, is the thing that we're aiming for this time around. Like better organization, better cohesion.
Less last minute.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
And hard agree with historical LARP is reenactment without an audience, or reenactment is LARP with an audience.
Yeah. Same thing. Great. Good. So when we talk about events in the future, we'll have some stuff that we've done as well, not just talk about what we're hoping to do.
Pictures.
Pictures, yes, we need pictures.
I noticed there's a share slideshow button on this, so
there is. So we're trying out this restream thing. Alex and I kind of last month, Drac and I managed to kind of do things with Zoom and that sort of thing, but there's a lot of buttons on here that should make this a lot easier. Okay, now we're on the main topip. We're 43 minutes in and we're in the main topic.
That's better than Warhammer Weekly.
Yeah, yeah, it's very good. So the aim would be every month to have a topic of the month that we talk about, and this is voted for from a curated selection, but it's voted for by my Patreon members. So if that's something that would interest you, that kind of perk, then you can head over. It's the night level patrons get a vote in what we're going to be talking about. And this week, this month, we are going to be talking about armor problems and fixes. So obviously we both have a late 15th century angle on this. So take what we say with a late 15th century grain of salt. And this is our kind of what we've experienced in regards to that. If you've got any questions about anything that we say, then please leave them below. We kind of have some ideas about what we want to talk about, but these kind of things are easier sometimes with questions. So yeah, please do leave some in the chat. So armor problems and fixes. What problems have you experienced with your armor? And then how did you go about fixing it? Give me one.
One. Okay. Well, so the most common problem that has plagued me in recent years, and Zach has kind of experienced the consequences of this, is the point armor on giving way and breaking whilst you're wearing armor. And this can happen for a number of reasons. Some years ago, it was happening because the points I was using are kind of saying they weren't up to the task is like an unfair statement, but the line of arming point, and I should say, an arming point is the piece of fabric or leather or something that holds your armor to whatever garment it is that you're wearing to support the structure of it. And they can be on the shoulder or on the legs or whatever. And the design of arming point that I had made, the design was not up to the task. And over the years, I've kind of developed, I've gone through a lot of different types of arming points and had them fail for different reasons, and landed on the ones that I have now, which I think work really, really well. But they still can fail because fabric gets damaged and gets weakened and then can eventually break.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so I originally started with single-stranded loose-setted arming points like these ones.
Yeah.
And although they are good and strong and they don't stretch, which is a problem in itself, is that sometimes the points themselves can stretch and that causes the armor to slip, which then causes twists, which can encourage it to snap. Because they're only manufactured out of a single cord, one failure is a failure on the whole thing. Mm-hmm. So I've since moved to a braided point style, which is actually made up of 12. I don't know if this is where we need those slides, Zach.
Yeah.
But these are made of 12 strands, so one or two failing, the whole thing still works. And then you can swap it out at a later date. The other type of point that I've had a lot of success with is very similar to these fine leather ones. Yeah. The problem with leather is if you don't get leather cut in the right way from the right part of the cow or the whatever animal you're making leather from, is it can be very stretchy, which then causes things to slip. So that's the most common problem that I've been fighting with over the last few years.
Yeah.
And I see that other people have talked about points in the chat.
Yeah.
Drac. I used to have that problem. Having a wider gap in the mail has helped me with that in the past. Because Drac says, what's the best way to stop mail from soaring away at your points, especially when it comes to skirt and legs? The other thing is lots of wax. Like really heavily waxed points just have that layer of protection and stuff slides over the knot much easier, less likely to cut it in my experience. Mm-hmm. I see a suggestion about multiple points on the same piece. Yes, I have 2 points now on my legs, and I might be moving to 3.
We were talking about how many points we use because over WhatsApp, because my new harness needed more points, so I was having to dig around and find more points. My old harness, I harness it all on with 6 points. That's it.
I bought new ones for my harness. So this is 4. I think I need like 16 or 18 of them for my harness.
Yeah. So the style of harness really kind of changes how many points you need. And there's so many times when points have failed and it's caused a problem for my armor. What's really frustrating, I've got some really nice photos someone took of me in a joust, and they're really lovely photos, but they're at a point when my points in my elbow armor had broken and I didn't realize. So the armor on my arm is looking weird. So whenever we use it, we need to crop it correctly. But what I actually did, so when I was jousting, I found that because I have, in my old harness, I have floating arms where they're pointed. The Kuta, the elbow armor, is pointed to the fan brace and rear brace. And I found that those points would break every single weekend. Maybe not every show, but every weekend. And in the end, I just went and changed them for a riveted setup, and that's worked very well. To answer Alex's question from my point of view, skirts and legs can be a problem because they're not going through, they're just sitting on top. So where I've got my points going through my standard, the least amount of movement you can create there will be the best thing for that. Because it's not that the male is next to it; it's that the male is moving backwards and forwards over it, and that creates a soaring motion.
And the other thing is that more flare in the skirt will mean as you turn, it will lift away and chafe less.
Yeah,
and certainly male skirts is something that we'll come on to later. But illustrations, like highly detailed illustrations, often show male skirts that are hanging with these folds, almost pleats in them. And that shape comes from having a kind of flared set of mail on that you can often purchase, and that just produces keeps, as you move, the mail moves away from your body rather than dragging against things.
Yeah, and staying tight, doesn't it? And a way that you can do that without paying for, I know Augusto says that you can get tailor-made mail that's not from India, which is kind of what you've been saying. And also if you do get a higher quality mail, then it's less likely to have sharp areas on the rivets and things like that. But what I've done with mine, because mine isn't tailored, but it's gathered at the top, so it's a big rectangle, but where I've sewn it to my belt, it's gathered in. So it is actually still wider at the bottom than it is at the top. So that is a cheaper way of creating that kind of of an effect. Hopefully that might help. Multiple points on the same piece. I've done that on my arm armor for years, and I need to think about how I'm going to do that with my new harness, because like I said, it needs more points than my previous harness, so I need to think about where they're going to be.
When I currently have Ash, who's made pretty much all my armor, making pauldrons for me to fit the rest of them. And when I get them, I'll be able to show them off, and we can talk about different harnesses and the difference between them, because we both have we both have full English harnesses at that point, right?
Yeah.
Different periods and different effigies. But I'm going to have to completely rethink how my shoulders attach, because it's pauldrons rather than spaulders, and I either wear small spaulders or the spaulders that fit with my brigandine, and they sit in a completely different location. So I may be in a situation where I'm having to thread standard like you do, Zach, in order to fit those pauldrons on, where I don't currently have to do that now with my spaulders.
And that's simple enough. And the having the holes in the standard, we have a weird thing about not wanting gaps in our armor, but no, if it's like if you remove a few rings around the shoulder so that your points don't get cut in half, that is a much better problem than having your armor fall off halfway through a battle.
Ooh, and also, if depending on the armor you've got, you're dragging the armor up over that gap. If the points are going through the armor rather than through a leather tab, like some designs have, then you're already putting a layer of protection over that gap that you've created in your mail by making it possible to wear.
Yeah, absolutely. Alex says, to be honest, a big one is research over modern common sense. Looking at what they did expedites solutions to problems.
When we were talking about this topic, we said that might be end up being the answer to a lot of our questions. Is, well, go look at what they did in the period, and then do it.
It's like what this topic could actually be called: where did you deviate from historical research, and what did you learn about? About how they fixed it in the period.
Yeah. All right, Alex, what's your starting point for armor problems and how you fixed it?
Right. So I've already talked about my my cooters falling off. That was a big problem for me. I'm going to go back way further to leg armor and wearing leg armor. When I very, 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 very first started wearing armor, my leg armor was not the stuff that I have now. It was incredibly heavy. It was something like 3 millimeters thick, mild steel. It was not. It was not a friendly thing to wear. And not only that, I wore it because I didn't know any better off a belt that was about 1.5 inches thick, made of hard leather, and it was pointed at, or was it buckled? Might even have been buckled at the front. And the way that all of those things added up, they all added up to my hips would bleed after every battle. But my idea at the time was, this is what medieval knights had to put up with, right? Armor is like that. That's the price you pay for not having your legs cut off. And yes, Augusto, 3 millimeters. Yeah, it was it was not elegant. In the end, so often when I finish with a piece of armor and buy new stuff, I will sell on the old armor. I did not sell on that armor because I could not bear to have someone else wear something that of that kind. Yeah. So yeah. Augusto also said, remember they sold points by the dozen? Literally, yes. And pretty much every arming document I've read says that you need to have a spare 12 points sitting in your kit. Otherwise, it's not going to work.
Yeah. There's now.
Yeah. Graham, happy to have you. Doesn't matter that you're late. Corrugated Cavalier says, my current leg harness is too heavy as well. I made my own Lendenia, which is better than a hard leather belt for sure, but it still does put some stress on my hip bones. Yeah. And for a while, we went away from belts altogether, didn't we, as a community? And we said, you never wear a belt. It's always attached to your doublet.
Yeah.
And then I found out about Lendenias through the research that Knight Errant posted on his channel, which was an interesting thing. But now again, I've started to see Lendenias being, sold, which are actually just straight belts. They're a rectangle, a long thin rectangle, and
what's new is old.
Yeah, we're kind of circling back around, and yeah. So to fix it, first of all, if you do have a Lendenia, so a Lendenia is a in-period name. It seems to be an in-period name for something that is worn in addition to an arming doublet, and that the armor for your legs is suspended from it. There's not a lot of evidence about exactly what they were like, but you can get the full lowdown by searching it up, and Knight Errant has done an excellent video on that quite a while ago. But really important for me was moving where I pointed the legs, because when they're pointed at the front of the leg, I found that incredibly uncomfortable, and they tended to kind of swing round to the middle and twist as I wore them. Whereas having them pointed at the edge of the hips, so on the edges, is much, much better. And it spreads the weight. So instead of pulling down on my front, the weight balances itself out on either side of me. I find that's much more useful.
I think and I noticed a couple of people in the chat have been saying something similar. The kind of the common theme that I found with solutions, like period inspired solution, modern failures to find a solution, is missing the point, or like hitting that thing where you need it to be tight around your midsection, not necessarily around your hips, because you want to be carrying that weight more on your core muscles than on your hip muscles. And the way that some garments will solve this is by like corseting in really tight around the waist, and some of them will solve it by other ways and fits and this kind of thing. But certainly for me, my life changed when I started wearing it with a arming doublet that was not super tight but snug around the waist, so that it distributed that weight across my core muscles and across the top of my hips, rather than pulling down on the shoulders, as a couple of people in the chat have mentioned.
Yeah, and if you can extend it up to the natural waist instead of the just the hips, the more you spread the surface area across your body, the less pressure is put on any one part, right?
Yeah.
Which then also prevents slippage, because we are not made of steel. And so, when a large amount of pressure is being placed on a part of our body, it will deform. When that same amount of pressure is placed over a larger area, it will not deform the body quite so much. So that's another good reason to have to work on your arming garments and working on that. It seems that we're doing a discussion on armor problems, and all we've talked about is textiles and fabrics.
Yeah, textiles. I'm also spying some comments and questions in the chat. So hey, Colin, it's good to see you here. And yeah, immersive events are definitely is. The fit of your armor, as pointed out, absolutely helps. Armor that fits better will be easier to wear and produce less problems. And I also saw a question about variable armor thickness in the 15th century. Zach, you can probably talk more about the jousting side of things, but the armor thickness varying as it's worked into shape is just a happenstance of making the more complex shapes in these armors. And it's pretty clear from metallurgy tests on extant pieces that, although understand chemical metallurgy, they understood that if they worked metal in a certain way, they would produce certain properties. So making it thicker or tougher or more brittle but harder, and these kinds of things.
Yeah, they understood what they were doing, even if they didn't understand kind of the why of it, right?
Yeah,
that makes sense. So the thicknesses of different parts of armor is an interesting one. There's a lot of pitfalls to go with that, and Augusto again has done so much research on this. And he's put together a bunch of really great posts in the Facebook group of 15th century medieval armor, 15th century European armor. Sorry. So if you want to go and have a look at some of these, which share kind of the different thicknesses of different parts of harnesses, then go and have a look at those and search up Augusto. As he's just said in the chat, broadly speaking, the middle and front of the armor is thicker, yes. And we definitely see that as a trend. What we've got to be careful of when we look at these numbers, we can go, oh, this is quite different. Sometimes something might be 0.7 millimeters, and something else might be 1.2 millimeters thick, and that, because of the numbers being used, seems to our stupid brains that is a big difference. but it is not really necessarily a difference that will be detectable to the human eye very much. And that is, they weren't going around with digital calipers making this armor. Yes, they were trying to make the fronts and often the left hand side of the armor stronger and thicker, and they did do that. But sometimes, like the fact that the right vambrace is 0.3 of a millimeters thicker than the left vambrace isn't necessarily because they were trying to do something. It might just be that that's just how it worked out. And our stupid brain will go, oh yeah, there's a big difference between 1.9 and 2.3 millimeters or something like that. Where actually it's not a lot, not a lot at all. It's just that because it's gone over the millimeter break in the decimal that we think so. I've just seen Graham has given us a super tip. Thank you very much, Graham. That's very kind of you. Yeah, that will go to hopefully growing the channel and new exciting things for the future. Let's say.
Yeah.
Augusto, we need to get you on as a guest on one of these. He says, yes, there are exceptions, of course, as always. 0.5 millimeters does make a big difference. Yes. It depends, doesn't it, though? When it comes to like the center of a breastplate, which might be 2 to 2.3 millimeters thick, that 2.3 changing to 1.8 is very different than 0.5 changing to 1. So, yeah, I see your point. And Sante Kosmikov says, can you save the stream? It will be on the channel afterwards. Yeah, it'll be available on the channel afterwards. Yes. Yeah. So if you need to go, then you can always watch it again later. That was quite a long detour down the line of armor thicknesses. Nick, what other problems have you had with your armor?
I think I talked about one of them when we would, because I had similar problems with holding legs up and pulling on the shoulders in the wrong way, and that kind of thing. To keep on the theme of talking about textiles rather than the actual steel we're talking about, I used to wear a helmet which didn't have an integral lining.
Mm-hmm.
And you end up with these very bulky padded coifs or padded caps or these kinds of things, some of which are potentially just reenactorisms that have been that was never there in the period or made in the wrong way. And the thing that always used to drive me mental was I would put the padded arming coif on and then put the helmet over the top, and then it would fold on underneath the front of the forehead and create these little ridges that just drive me mental. Anyway, the solution was that I bought a helmet that was made for me that had an integral padded liner rather than just nothing or a very thin leather suspension in it. And I've not had that problem since. But the answer isn't just buy something that's made to fit you. It was that the padded liner was the right size for my head and integral to the helmet, rather than being a separate piece that could kind of shift and move underneath the helmet and get squished into different places.
Yeah. Yeah. And that that kind of could, let's extend that then. So basically it was finding a permanent solution, really, wasn't it? Because I've had similar problems where basically something isn't quite working, so I kind of jerry rig a solution to it that just about makes it work, and then you get on with it because you know
Yeah.
it's armor. It's not supposed to be comfortable. We've got this idea in our head that plate armor is not supposed to be comfortable. But yeah, it's that's not the case. It can be comfortable, and you just need to work on it. And when you get it working, you can really have
I
it working well.
I do wonder, because there are parts of my armor that I would consider comfortable, right? Like my helmet is pretty comfortable to wear. It's heavy because I deliberately got it made thick, which we're having lots of conversations about the thickness of armor. And in my experience, reenactment armor is often made thicker than period armor because it's designed to take a different type of stress and a different type of damage to the period, because we reuse stuff way more. Right? Like, I need my helmet to work for years in life once. It's not like a cycle helmet where once it's damaged, I discard it. I need this thing to keep working. So it's a bit thicker and heavier than a period example would be. But it's comfortable to wear. My brig is exceptionally comfortable to wear. I can wear it pretty much all day. I have worn it all day at events, like 14 hours or so. No problem. My cuirass, much less comfortable, because just by the nature of the construction of it, it's much more rigid, so it's less comfortable to wear. Make me wonder, like, where the line would be for a medieval person wearing armor, and the line is for us wearing armor, what they would call comfortable and what we call comfortable.
Yeah.
But certainly your armor should not actively harm you. Like, that's kind of I know it sounds like a low bar, but in my experience wearing some armor in reenactment, in over my reenactment career is the wrong word. Over my time in reenactment, I know time in reenactment, my armor doesn't hurt me. Felt like a bar that couldn't be reached at times.
Yeah.
And yeah. But I do wonder if, like, tolerance for discomfort is lower than a period tolerance for discomfort.
Yeah, I see what you mean, and I think because maybe not even just a period thing, but a kind of theatre thing, right? Pardon me. We are doing this as a hobby, and you don't really want your hobby to be actively painful, whereas they wore armor literally like as this is going to save my life. I need to be here. I'm obligated to be here to fight. This is going to save my life. I think in that situation, you're going to put up with a little bit of discomfort. But at the same time, they had to wear it in for a lot longer at the same time. So, we know of in sieges or in forced marches, people having to wear full plate armor for sometimes days at a time. So, yes, you could put up with discomfort in the event that it's going to save your life, but you also do want to have it working well. And we can kind of take this to Leonidas Sparta's point of changing muscle mass and weight loss and weight gain. This is a problem. I'm very skinny. Nick is incredibly kind to me. Some reenactors are much meaner about how thin I am. But even Nick needs to sometimes tell me to eat a pie. but it doesn't really matter how many pies I eat. I just kind of stay at a similar shape, but I can get thinner. And I think I actually did at Tewkesbury last year because it was so hot. I did actually end up losing a very small amount of weight over the course of the weekend, but that can cause a big problem if your armor is of a certain setup. And I think understanding your body and your body type and choosing armor that fits with the way that you are is really important. Maybe this can be my second thing because this is kind of a new thing, isn't it? But think about when you're choosing your armor, how the armor that you're having reproduced is going to interact with you. So, like I said, I don't tend to gain or lose very much weight, even though I try. A hinged cuirass, which is what I've always had, is therefore a pretty safe bet for me because I don't change the size of my waist very much. If you know that your waist is going to change over the course of a year, then a hinged cuirass might be a problem for you because you can't change the circumference of the waist as much on a hinged cuirass as you can on a strapped cuirass.
And I want to kind of piggyback on the end of that about knowing your body and knowing like what you can and can't wear, and knowing which parts of your body can be compressed comfortably to fit these things. Like I know that even if I, am carrying a bit more weight around my midsection because I haven't done as well as I can do in like getting into shape before I wear my armor for the first time, that I can stand a bit of compression there underneath my strapped cuirass. And you can produce that compression by like doing up the straps and then tightening up the straps. But I couldn't do that, for example, with my male standard. If I compress my neck too much around the male standard, I just end up choking myself. And that's no good. And armor is such an investment, certainly at the level of talking about an armor that is made for you is such an investment. Making that right decision about something that's going to fit you and about something that's going to be comfortable to wear is really important. And that's probably another reason why I love my Brig so much, is because it has more flexibility as my weight changes, as my muscle mass goes up and down over the year, depending on what, I work from home doing software engineering. It's a very sedentary lifestyle, but once I get into the reenactment season, I'm in a field every weekend putting tents up and down and doing displays and all of this sort of thing. Your muscle mass builds back up again. And then if I had something that was made that couldn't expand over the shoulders, by the end of the year, it'd be incredibly uncomfortable.
Yeah. And it's possible to just upgrade parts of your armor, isn't it? Or change parts of your armor as things go. There's the that Game of Thrones scene that everyone likes to post about the breastplate stretcher and that sort of thing. But there's certain things. Western European armor tends to have a separate breastplate to fold, and it's very possible that you could just upgrade or change the breastplate as if you change size, or have several possibilities that you could wear. Depending on how you're doing and how much exercise you've done recently and that sort of thing. Paleo Artie says you'd have grown up wearing it too. Yeah, conditioning is definitely a part of it, and I felt it a lot last year. Coming back to reenactment, Tewkesbury. Not only was it incredibly hot, so pre-COVID, I was literally every month, one weekend of every month, I spent in full plate armor, practicing jousting, literally, like through the winter as well. That did not continue through COVID, and the first events back were absolutely killers. So even if we can't go back in time and send 8-year-old Zach off to a castle somewhere to learn to be a page and a squire, but you can condition yourself to this sort of thing. But be kind to yourself and be aware that, you know, if you're coming out of let's say like a slow period, don't expect the world.
Yeah.
Unless you're 18, you know. We're getting older now, Nick and I.
Yes. Yeah. I noticed the comment here about Charles the Bold sleeping in his chair in almost full armor. I have, and I know many other people who have fallen asleep in their armor at various times. It's like that does not surprise me at all. Knowing people who have fallen asleep literally on the battlefield, theatrical deaths, and then are waiting for the end of the battle, they will just doze off because you're tired. Yeah. So people sleeping in harness in the 15th century, you know, you read about Edward IV making his armies spend the night in armor before Barnet so that they can get a dawn, take the Lancastrian army of Warwick by surprise. And how you spend all night in armor, but when you know people who can just doze off in when they're wearing their armor, seems a lot more realistic at that point.
It's kind of as well, like, it's quite comforting. I don't know that I've ever gone to sleep, but I might have had it's like, yeah, it's supportive. It's like a weighted blanket, like, you know.
Yep.
It's protective. Robert DC says, Zach, do you take your partner with you when you go to joust? She does come along sometimes, but she doesn't reenact. Nick, your partner, comes and she reenacts as well, doesn't she?
Yes, she does.
Yeah. So it takes all sorts, you know, and it's, for me, I find that having my wife not as involved in this as I am, but supportive, is helpful in keeping me in the 21st century, because otherwise I would just be down that rabbit hole. And I would spend very little time in the present. What is the best suit of armor? Hang on, shall we? So, Nick, do you have any other armor problems? And then, if not, shall we go to questions?
Yeah, let's just go to I think at this point, are you doing a caption or shall I?
I'll do a caption. Go on, you say what you were going to say.
I was going to say, I think I pretty much exhausted the one that I had thought of ahead of time, and we've kind of hit on something that I want to reiterate that a couple of people in the chat have said, that we've said a couple of times in the conversation, is that a lot of the times when we've had issues with armor, going back to period sources, to illustrations, to looking at what people did when they had to wear the equipment as a piece of like real military equipment to save their lives, has often contained the solution to the problem that we're looking at. Mm-hmm. And I do think that sometimes with materials or a modern way of things doesn't always come to the right solution or a useful solution. And looking back at period sources, as with many things in this hobby, often contains the answer you're looking for, or the answer maybe not the one you were looking for.
And that's actually made me think of another problem that I have had and seen, is people using modern materials because they assume modern materials will be better. So a great example is using foam as padding inside helmet, whereas actually, because it is more padded in a given definition of padding, but it's not going to. There's different foams, right? Some foams might be better than others. But if you were to put a sponge in there, for example, a sponge can compress to be so small that it actually doesn't pad at all. And it looks like it's going to do the job of a padding, but it won't. So be wary of modern materials and that kind of chronological snobbery of, oh, it's a newer material, so therefore it must be better. Have a look at the materials that they did use and think carefully about why they might have chosen those. Because it's very often not just like a two-dimensional thing of, oh, this is padding, so therefore any type of padding is going to be good. That. Yeah. Great. Cool. Let's go on to questions.
Yeah.
So, Robert DC asked the question: what is the best suit of armor that you would all like to try on? There is a correct answer to this, so I'm going to let Nick say his answer.
I'm gonna leave aside the like. I would love to wear a extant harness. I don't care what it is, but like a harness from the 15th century, like that is top tier. Would love to wear that. However, I'm not going to be fighting in that. So next step down is something that I could actually like do the reenactment that I enjoy in.
Mm-hmm.
Toby has a really nice like that fantasy inspired harness. I think that would be awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Or it's nice harnesses out there are made for other people, and they have their personal spin on it. Like, yes, it's copied from an effigy or it's copied from an illustration, but there are decisions that have been made by the person commissioning that piece to cover up, to fill in the things that aren't there.
Yeah.
So it's kind of hard to choose somebody else's harness because you may well make different decisions that they made. But if I had to pick one that somebody else has had made, I would go for the 50. I can't remember the name of the artwork that it's from, but you know the one I'm talking about, Zach?
Yeah, it's not St George. It's it's in the Glasgow museums, and Toby had one made. A few other people have had similar but different ones made.
I think it's called the Heroic. Is that right?
Yeah. There's actually, because Toby's one was done really, really quickly because he was given a job at a joust and he'd already sold his black armor and he didn't have his new armor ready.
Yes.
So he was researching heroic armor at the time and went to about 5 different armorers and said, right, we've got X amount of time. Let's make this. So it was pieced together with stuff that he already owned and a few bits that he could either get off the shelf or and a couple of custom pieces. So
there you go, simply from a Netherlandish piece, from a piece of artwork. That one.
Yeah. Okay. That is a good choice. I'm glad that you didn't choose something that's German Gothic.
Because, why would I choose that?
Yeah. The correct choice is, of course, Theoden's armor.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So that is the armor that I would like to try on. So, Richard Taylor, when you're watching this, get in contact with me.
Yeah.
Sort it out. Leonardo Sparta said the Greeks had an interesting way of allowing the bell cuirass to adapt its size, actually. One side was pinned and the other one, covered by the shield, had a lip that it could slot into and slide in while being tied at the bottom. Very interesting. So that would be slightly different in that very often the pinned hinged side on a medieval cuirass would be the left side, whereas Leonidas is saying that the Greek pins would be on the right side because of the huge shield.
Yeah.
Interesting. The context of it makes so much sense once you know the context, right?
Yeah.
Mocha Rabbit says, haha, or get training. Yeah, get training. Armored nap time is a fantastic tradition. I'm always happy to reenact. Yes.
Yes.
Authentic sleeping. Robert DC says, Zach, have you fixed the armor? The issue you have with your new armor being the breastplate and the skirt plates that came apart when you tried it on with your brother. I have planned to get it fixed. I booked to see to go and see an armourer and get it done. Unfortunately, it fell through due to childcare, sorting out childcare. But there will be a couple of videos on it, including a trip to an armourer to get that sorted, as well as sharing everyone's thoughts on how to solve it. Corrugated Cavalier says, yes, my Corazina is a big giant hug of many plates of steel, but hey, yeah. Well, that's kind of, yeah. When it fits you nicely, it does change your mentality. Maybe we should do a video about that at some point. The mentality, what it feels like being in armor. Because it really changes the way that you act and the way that you're able to interact with other people, I found.
Yes.
I think we're getting too late to really get into that now. But
yeah, I think that's a topic for a conversation, and I think that would be really good as a set of going into like a meta planning stage right now. I think a set of interviews rather than a live stream for that, because then you can get a really wide range of opinions and put together and draw some conclusions from it.
Maybe we could interview everyone who's in the bodyguard of the Duke of Gloucester or something like that.
Yeah,
that would be good.
Depends on how warm it is, but yeah.
Kisaki says, thanks for making me feel normal sleeping with a chainmail blanket. I never said that was normal.
But I'm glad we could help.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, why not? You can do what you want to with when it comes to how you go to sleep. That's up to you. Certainly, a chainmail blanket helping you to feel safe is a lot more sensible than what a lot of people that I've heard will say things like, "Oh, I only feel safe if I've got the blanket over my head" or something like that. That's the blanket isn't going to protect you any, and you can't see, like, if there is an intruder coming, you can't see what they're about to do. So that's a worse situation. That's like hiding under the table from the raptors and not knowing whether they're, where they are. I always like to sit with my back against the wall and eyes on all entrances. That's how I like to do it. Augusto says, cutting corners with modern materials and solution with armor never works. Never. We like to think of ourselves as smarter than our ancestors because science. Yeah, like there is a chronological snobbery, and I think that I've been very guilty of it in the past, and I try to catch it when I'm being like that now. Just because we can use titanium doesn't mean that we should. Like, sometimes, and this is, I'm not sure where I stand on this argument, so leave your opinions in the comments or the chat, depending on where you are. So I've heard an argument made that just using something that is more authentic in some ways might not be the best route. So the example given was leather. So when you're making straps, using a veg tan leather, which is arguably more authentic than a chrome tan leather, is, because chrome tan wasn't in the 15th century. Yes, the veg tan leather might be more authentic from that point of view, but what's more important to creating an armor that works well is that the properties of the leather are accurate. So just choosing a veg tan because it's a veg tan, and ignoring, how stretchy the leather is, like you were saying earlier, Nick, or like all of those sorts of things is worse. It would be better to use a chrome tan that shares the properties than a veg tan that doesn't. So, yeah.
It's a common discussion that certainly I've had with other members of Middleton's about clothing, is the type of weave in wool, and what's an appropriate weave of wool and weight of wool to use to create specific garments. Hose being the classic example where you need a huge amount of stretch and this kind of thing.
Yeah.
And you can simulate the stretch that we assemble from artwork and description that you can't get out of modern wool by using modern materials. Now, which is more authentic? Is it having a better fit and a better look, or using the correct material?
Mm-hmm.
And that is probably a good topic for another discussion another time, is materials versus function, and that kind of thing. But certainly, if you're using a modern material and it's not behaving right, as has been said, like, you've got to go back and look at what the sources say, because and I think that's kind of my answer to the question, that if it reproduces the function better than a modern steel does, then that's fine. Or if your function is to create something that the properties of titanium make it more appropriate, because you're creating your reproduction piece of armor to do something that requires the properties of titanium, then that's what you should do. I would never choose to do that.
Yeah, because it loses all value as a, no, maybe not all value. It loses value as a archaeological piece. Like, you don't learn as much when it's not authentic, as accurate as you can get it, right? And yes, you can say that the iron that we have is different and the mild steel that we have is different. Yes, you can't get it completely perfect, but the further you go from the original piece, the less value what we do has as a experimental archaeology side of things.
Mm-hmm.
YJ says Henry VIII's armor with the armpit and crotch flames might be the coolest, technically speaking. Yeah, a lot of English people don't realise that there are 3 or 4 armours almost identical to that in a French museum. And the possibility is, although it wouldn't have been written down, is that the reason why the rules were changed and he didn't use that armour ever is because the French armourers could actually make it work and his armourers couldn't. Possibly. We don't know, because no one would ever write that.
Yeah.
But the French have got 4, and he's got 1 half-finished one. Yeah. Who knows? Maybe in the future we'll find out. But that's an interesting little story. What would be the worst historical style of armor? So we could go on all night answering questions. Nick, have we got time for a few more?
I think a couple more, and then we're probably going to have to call it.
Yeah.
But I think this has been good. And to say, put other questions in the comments on Zach's channel, and we'll do our best to get to them.
Yeah, and we are going to be doing this every month, hopefully. First Wednesday of the month. So it's in my diary, and we'll get some more guests on. So yeah, we can always come back next month and ask a question.
Worst historical style of armor. Zach, do you want to go first this time? Because I went first with the armor that you most want to try.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Yeah. The Nilfgaardian armor from season 1 of The Witcher.
Does that count in the historical category?
Oh yeah. Well, it is quite historical. I was just thinking, like, yeah, that would just I would not want to do that. So, from a personal point of view, and I'm sorry, Leonidas Sparta, it would probably be the classical Greek hoplite armor. Yeah, I can go into details of why, but Nick, do you want to share your thoughts?
I was going to say something similar. Mine was kind of a broader category: is anything that requires you to carry your primary piece of protective equipment. Anything that involves carrying a big shield is just like I have done earlier periods that require carrying a big shield. I don't find that very fun. I'd much prefer to wear my protective equipment than have to carry it. And I think that either kind of hoplite Greece or kind of Rome kind of embodies that with the massive shields.
Yeah. And the completely undefended thighs.
But you're covering that with a shield, right? Like that at least makes sense. But
that's the problem, right? Is that you're not always. I'd quite like to have a go at Greek reenactment, but if I did, then I'd be a cavalryman.
That's your
not
answer.
Have to carry around the huge shield. Yeah, I quite like being an infantryman for other periods, but the hugeness of the shield, and the fact that large portions of you are unprotected without the shield. Yes, with the shield you are protected, but yeah, that's my personal. And also, I don't think I've got the body for it. I'm too thin. I'd look like someone has part gilded a collection of hose pipes. Corrugated Cavalier says, when my helmet is on and my visor is down, I'm a totally different person. Absolutely. Yeah. Saki says, kidding about the blanket. I think we need to try this. Maybe that's a future video as well.
Just put it between two layers of wool.
Yeah.
Comfortable and protective when you're sleeping.
Yeah. Let's see. Are there any more questions?
I think we may have reached the level. But it's a good time to wrap up.
Leonidas, let's just let Leonidas respond to our comments. Perhaps we could do a video on this at some point. Interesting, you should raise these points, as during the archaic era we see full armor and leg harnesses. Yeah, I've even seen in the British Museum there's some really cool sabatons from ancient Greece.
That's the banded copper and bronze, right?
Maybe we should do that at some point. Yeah. Okay. Lovely. Thank you very much, everyone. It's been great.
Thank you everyone for watching. It's good.
We need to do a call to action now. I need to try and remember to do everything. So
yeah,
we've got liking. If you haven't liked it and you've watched it for 1 hour and 43 minutes, then you should probably like it. Because otherwise you're just a masochist, right? Share it. Hopefully there's some people in your life who need to know about points and that ancient Greek armor is the worst armor. So share this with those people. Subscribe if you haven't already. Check out my Patreon, which is in the description, I believe. And if you would like to help us to decide the topic of our next live stream, then you can sign up as a night level on the Patreon. I've got 2 so far. They are, I always panic I'm going to get this wrong. So we've got Robert and we've got Sir Loin de Boeuf, which is an excellent pun. So do come and join us over there and help the channel grow. Thank you so much, Nick, for joining me.
Thank you for having me. It's been a really nice. It's a really good chat.
And we will definitely do this again sometime. We'll do it next
month.
Next month, 1st of March, isn't it?
Yes, because it's February.
Yeah, yeah, it is February already. All right, thank you guys. See you soon.